Good evening. Welcome to Richmond. How else should I say it? Right? The first time here, I don't know what to make of it yet. I just came off the plane and now I'm here. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, but it's a very pretty city, at least that much I could say. You know, a lot of green, grass, parks, trees. It's nice. Rabbi Nachman would have fallen in love with a place like this because he used to say, go out to the fields for hitbodedut, for your private prayers. So we'll come to that in a few minutes, in Yirtzeh Hashem. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, born when the Americans were making their famous Boston Tea Party in 1772, and he passed away in 1810, 38 years later. Yet, for such a short lifespan, he left an incredible impact on the world. He studied in very great yeshivas. He studied in universities throughout the world. We have gotten correspondence from universities throughout Europe and so on, asking for Rabbi Nachman works and so on, here in the States and so on. What makes Rabbi Nachman so special? Okay? I mean, we have now a phenomenon called Rosh Hashanah, which happens every year. It's happened for the last 5,779 years, right? But for the last 30 years, there's been increasing numbers of people traveling to Rabbi Nachman's gravesite in Uman, in Ukraine. You know, that, what do they call it? The Ukrainian Riviera, right? Those who have been there know what it looks like and whatnot. And you ask yourself, what is Rabbi Nachman's draw? I feel maybe we should go back a little bit history just to get an idea. The Jews lived in Europe, France and Germany, and the French and the Germans made life miserable for them, so they started migrating eastward. And they were welcomed with open arms in Poland. Poland at that time was a very large empire, and it stretched all the way to the eastern Ukraine. Where you have Ukraine on the map today, all that was part of Poland. And the Jews lived an autonomous living there. They had their own courts, they had their own systems, and everything was more or less okay. That took place till 1648. 1648 arose a Polish peasant, Bogdan Chmielnicki, Yimach Shemoy, and he caused a rebellion against the Polish government, and they rose up and they ran westward almost to the Prussian border, where they went and decimated the Jewish communities. Nearly 1 million Jews were killed. You talk about a Holocaust 70 years ago? That was mechanized. Gas chambers, trains, everything. Chmielnicki, with his hordes, ran around with horse and buggy, and they killed nearly 1 million Jews in a period of a few years in 1648. 20 years later, the communities in Europe were still devastated. Along rose Shabtai Tzvi, a false Messiah, and he went and he promised hope. And everybody, oh, great, look what we have. We have this great hope and whatnot, the great white hope, whatever you want to call them. And unfortunately, Shabtai Tzvi converted to Islam a couple of years later, right? He had a choice, live and become a Muslim, or where all the ISIS guys come from, or go ahead and die. So he chose Islam. Now, the Jews were devastated even more. When they finally began rebuilding, they found themselves lost. In the early 1700s, the Baal Shem Tov came out, and the Baal Shem Tov started teaching there is hope. He didn't declare himself Mashiach, but he did declare that there is hope for every single Jew. He brought joy, happiness, hope, prayer. Every person has a tremendous worth. Every person. And the Baal Shem Tov instilled that in his followers. And things were going good for the Hasidic movement. Baal Shem Tov passed away in 1760. And shortly afterwards, the Haskalah, the Enlightenment, began to raise its ugly face. So what you had then was the Baal Shem Tov, Hasidus. You had the Lithuanian community, the Misnagdim, who were opposed to Hasidus. So they fought terrible fights, disgusting fights actually, but that's what it was at that time. You know, you get something, we all have a cause. Anyone think of there's a cause against Trump, right? There's a cause. Doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Let's do the cause. The cause. And then the Haskalah came in. There's a wedge between Hasidim and Misnagdim. The Haskalah came in. Today, we're here in America. A lot of the migrants that came here were due to the Tsar. Poland ceased to exist as a nation in 1795. It began the division of Poland in 1772. It was over by 1795. Part went to Prussia, part went to Austria-Hungary, and over 1 million Jews were transferred under the authority of the Tsar of Russia. The Tsar of Russia took over the Ukraine at that time, which then was the center of Hasidus, and he came up with several decrees. One, the Cantonist decrees, where you take the Jewish children as young as 8 years old and you draft them into the Tsar's army for 25 years of service, right? They would be in a canton, which is like a camp, a military camp, till they were 18, and then they were officially drafted for 25 years. They forced secular education. It's one thing to study it of your own, it's another thing when they force it down your throat and they uproot the entire Jewish educational system that was in place in Eastern Europe. And the famous Pale of Jewish Settlement, which many of you may have heard of, when the Jews were forced to leave the rural areas, their income, livelihoods were destroyed. This was the situation when the Tsar took over in 1797. Rabbi Nachman was a young man of 25. And life was very, very bitter for the Jews in Eastern Europe at that time. What do you do? Right? What do you do? Your life is ending. One decree after the next, one decree after the next. Your life is being torn apart. What is happening to you as a Jew individually? Your family, your children, how will you teach them what Judaism is all about? As a community, there's no more community. You're being torn asunder, right? Hasidim, Misnagdim, even the Haskalah suffered. What do you do? The mission of a rabbi is to teach the community, hold them together. The mission of a Hasidic master is almost like that of Moshiach. You got to take the people, draw them together, make them part of the Am Yisrael, of that beautiful, wonderful nation, the Jewish nation. Take a look. I come here, Richmond, you have shuls here. I've been in other communities. We were talking about Eugene, Oregon, right? Which there's nothing there, but there's a Jew, and there's a precious Jew, right? We don't allow ourselves to develop, right? Imagine there's the Democratic and the Republican Party. In Israel, we have about 25 political parties. 25, right? There's 8 million people. Here there's 300 million. Here we have 2. There they have, it's like we don't allow ourselves. It's ourselves. The mission of the tzaddikim, the Hasidic masters, the great Hasidic masters, what they taught and what they're teaching today, their teachings are alive, is to bring us together, is to teach us that there is a God, He exists, we can make the connection, and here's what Rabbi Nachman has to say about that. Again, Rabbi Nachman was born in 1772. He made his pilgrimage to Israel in 1798. He passed away in Uman in 1810. 38 and a half years, right? But the legacy really lives on. So let's take some of the major teachings of Rabbi Nachman and see what he's saying to us, how it applies to us today. I mean, first thing, I would call him the master therapist, right? Today, isn't everybody in therapy? Right? Everyone goes therapy, right? Right? I call Rabbi Nachman the master therapist. This is 100 years before that guy Sigmund Freud. You ever hear of him? Right? He's called the first therapist, whatever. And he was 100 years before. And Freud already is, in Yiddish we say, abgezogt. He's like demeaned and thrown out by modern psychologists. Rabbi Nachman is still here, right? So what is Rabbi Nachman teaching? The first thing, let's say, is hitbodedut, or hisbodedus, as we say in Ashkenazi, right? Hisbodedus from the word boded, alone. He said, you're a person, you're an individual, and you're a valuable individual. But what good are you if you never develop yourself? If you never take yourself and become the person whom you could be, right? So how could you become the person? Speak to God. Hisbodedus from the word boded, alone, right? What he's saying is you be alone with God every day. Speak to God. A friend of mine puts it this way. How could you ever establish a relationship with someone with whom you never speak? Right? You never speak to God? How are you going to ever establish a relationship with Him? How are you ever going to get close to Him? How are you ever going to feel, to tap into His energy, which is boundless, it's infinite? How could you do it? Take time every single day and speak to God. He suggests an hour. I mean, what do you pay a therapist? You're on the couch for an hour. So you can take an hour and spend it with God. Spend it with Hashem. Sit next to Him on the chair, shut your phone, shut your iPad, shut out everything else around you. Sit there, Hashem, I'm here. What am I supposed to do with my life? I feel this. I feel that. I feel pain. I feel suffering. I feel challenged. I feel happiness. Whatever is in your heart, whatever is on your mind, express it. Articulate it before God. Say, Hashem, this is what happened to me. I had a fight with my friend. I'm sorry about it. How do I repair the damage? Hashem, I got problems, challenges at work, right? I'm having a difficult time financially. I'm having a difficult time with my wife, husband, whichever one you are, right? I'm having a difficult time with this child. I'm having a difficult time. I have an illness. Whatever it is that's in your heart, whatever it is that's on your mind, articulate it before Hashem. Bring Hashem into your picture. Make Hashem part of the equation. Now, this is not such a far-fetched thing. The Gemara says, it's a Gemara, 2,000 years ago. The Gemara says, Kol ha-mishatev shem shemayim b'tzaroi, right? Yishu also oifefes loi. Kesef toyafos loi. Whoever brings Hashem into his problem the money will run to